Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the webinar, Leave No One Behind, Action for an Age-Friendly Recovery, which is hosted by the Older People's Commissioner for Wales. And thank you all for joining us today. It's great to see that so many of you have been able to join us. Bore da, a chroeso I webinar Gadael neb ar ôl, camau gweithredu ar gyfer adferiad o blaid pobl hŷn. Sydd yn cael ei gynnal heddiw gan Gomisiynydd Pobl Hŷn Cymru, a diolch i chi gyd am ymuno gyda ni heddiw. Mae'n wych i weld bod cymaint ohonoch chi wedi gallu ymuno gyda ni heddiw. For those of you on Twitter, we'll be using the hashtag Leave No One Behind. And as it is the UN International Day for Older People, we will also be using the hashtag UNIDOP 2020. I'r rhai ohonoch sydd yn trydar, byddwn nhw'n defnyddio'r hashnod Gadael neb ar ôl. A gan ei bod hi'n ddiwrnod rhyngwladol cenedloedd unedig ar gyfer pobl hŷn, byddwn ni hefyd yn defnyddio'r hashnod UNIDOP 2020. Just before we start, I'd like to run through a couple of features of Zoom that we'll be using today. Firstly, Q&A. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. By clicking on this, you can enter any question you have as we go through the session, which is to be submitted to the Commissioner and the panel during the Q&A session later on. Questions can be submitted in either English or Welsh. Secondly, chat. Next to the Q&A button, you'll see a chat button. You can use this to share your thoughts and observations as we go through the webinar. These are shared openly with other attendees. It's like a chat. The webinar is also being recorded and will be circulated to all attendees following the webinar. Cyn ei bod ni'n cychwyn, swn i'n hoffi tynnu sylw at cwbl nodweddion Zoom y byddwn yn ddefnyddio heddiw. Q ag E. Ar waelod eich sgrin, fe welwch fotwm gyda Q and A arno. Trwy wasgu ar hwn, gallwch nodi unrhyw gwestiwn sydd gennych. Wrth i ni fynd trwy'r sesiwn, bydd yn cael ei roi i'r Comisiynydd a'r panel yn y sesiwn cwestiwn ac ateb chydig y bellach ymlaen. Gellir gosod y cwestiynau yn y Gymraeg neu yn y Saesneg. Yn ail, chat. Drws nesaf i'r botwm Q&A, fe welwch y botwm chat. Gallwch ddefnyddio hwn i rannu eich barn a'ch sylwadau tra bod ni'n mynd trwy'r webinar. Mae'r rhain yn cael ei rhannu yn agored da pawb arall sydd yma, fel sgwrs. Felly, heb ragor o ddimdroi, hoffwn ni nawr ddechrau y digwyddiad yn ffurfiol a gwahodd y Comisiynydd Helena Hyglos i agor y webinar. So without further delay, I would now like to formally start the event and invite the Commissioner, Helena Hyglos, to open the webinar.
Yep, George and Bodar, good morning everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar today on International Day of Older Persons, a day where we celebrate growing older and celebrate the contribution that older people make. But of course this year it's been a year like no other, where we're also reflecting on the impact of COVID-19 on older people across the world. As well as being International Day of Older Persons, it's also 10 years since the Equality Act came into force, designed to protect people against discrimination. So it seems appropriate to start with a focus on older people's rights. And despite the Equality Act, despite it being International Day of Older Persons, older people's rights seem in a perilous situation. The last 6 months have shown how human rights in older age are perhaps not as hardwired as we may have thought, too easily ignored or removed, and too little known. And today, reflecting on the last 6 months and everything that we've all been through and learnt, how we can draw from that to work together to ensure that we leave no one behind. So I want to start with a thank you to the older people, the community groups and the public bodies that me and the team have engaged with over the last few months. We drew on these discussions the wisdom, the ideas and the challenge for our Leave No One Behind report. And I also want to thank all those who've been working so hard in our communities and in our public bodies to support older people through this time. We called the report Leave No One Behind because that's how older people have expressed to me how they feel, and that's the risk as we look ahead. In the first 2 or 3 months of the pandemic, the word I heard most from older people was the word fear. Not just fear of COVID-19, but fear of isolation, of being left behind, of maybe not being valued as an older person. And this was particularly the case in relation to issues about DNA CPR, where people, and it also reflected itself in how people felt about their access to the health service. So, for example, one older person said, we are all feeling that if we do get ill as older people, whether we will get the treatment that we will deserve, or if we would be seen as dying soon, and if that would result in poorer treatment. And those issues and those feelings are still with us. And we need to reflect on those and think about how we can ensure that older people have the confidence now, and that older people know that they are valued as much as any other citizen. But we know also that we can work together towards an age-friendly recovery, where each and every generation is valued and plays its part in the healing and rebuilding that we will need. And there's some immediate actions which we've been pressing for, and others where we are working with others to make change happen. So we called early on for a care homes action plan, and we're expecting that imminently from the Welsh Government. We've argued that sections of the Coronavirus Act that risk limiting older people's rights should be repealed, and we continue to press for that. And we have argued also the importance of rehabilitation and reablement programme to assist older people who may have felt and may have experienced a deterioration in their physical and mental health. In the economy, we need to recognise the contribution of older workforce. A third of our workforce in Wales is now over 50, and 12% of key workers are over the age of 60. But we know that older workers are more likely to be made redundant in a recession and often find it more difficult to find work afterwards. So we need a dedicated programme to support workers to stay in work or retrain, and work to ensure that older people do not face age discrimination in the workforce. Alongside this, we need to recognise the poverty affecting older people, with 19% of older people relative poverty. We need a campaign assistance to help people get the pension credit that they're entitled to. But during the last few months, we have also seen some of the best of who we are, the way in which communities have come together to support people. And as we see, sadly, the increase again in coronavirus cases and more of our country in lockdown, we need to make sure, don't we, that we've learned and applied the lessons from the last 6 months. We need to make sure that older people can access essential supplies. We need to help community groups to provide support and, where possible, safely reopen local community resources. And we need to ensure that our communities are age-friendly, removing the barriers that get in the way of older people being able to participate, and putting in those measures which enable people to get out and about, to feel valued and to be connected. And we've all come to learn how important digital connection is. But 41% of people over the age of 75 are not online. So further action is needed to enable people to get online, as well as ensuring that those who are not online are not disadvantaged. We mustn't get into a situation where it becomes almost impossible to access public services or to be a full citizen without being online, until we make sure that everyone who wants to be is. And for some older people, lockdown has been particularly challenging and painful. For older people living in care homes who may have experienced the death of friends and who may still be separated from those they love and that make life worth living. For older people caring for loved ones, especially where they're caring for people with dementia and they haven't had the respite or the support that they would normally have had. Some of the most heartbreaking conversations I've had have been with older people exhausted and pushed to breaking point because of their caring responsibilities for a loved one. And we know also for some older people, the last 6 months has been a time where they've experienced abuse, domestic abuse behind closed doors, or experienced crimes being committed against them, where older people have been targeted for financial crimes linked to the pandemic. So as we look ahead, it can feel daunting, I think, for all of us. But we need to remember that we have much to draw on. The way that organisations have come together quickly to find solutions and make a difference. And my experience of that has been the over 30 organisations and older people that are now working with me as part of an action group on abuse to try and stop abuse happening, and if it does, to make sure the services and support are there. And we're making progress, and we're working in a way maybe we weren't able to 6 months ago. I think there has now, thankfully, been increased recognition and understanding of the value and importance of social care for each and every one of us, because all of us at some point in our lives is going to need social care for ourselves and our loved ones. And I hope that this recognition will lead to change, will lead to valuing people who work in social care, increased investment in social care, and a recognition of its importance for all of our society as well as our economy. And I've also been inspired really by the learning and solidarity across the UK and internationally amongst organisations representing older people. I've worked closely with other organisations across the UK, and today of all days, on International Day of Older Persons, a feeling of solidarity across the world as we celebrate what older people contribute to our societies and work together to learn from each other about how we can come through all the challenges that COVID-19 presents. And we've seen the kindness and compassion in our neighbours, in our friends, in our communities, and in our public services. And we will need to draw on all of this. So I want us to focus today on how we can work together, how we can share our experiences and expertise to make a difference, and how we can together pledge to leave no one behind. Now, I know that many of you who've read the Leave No One Behind report were moved and inspired by Margaret's story. And I'm delighted that Margaret is joining us today in conversation with my colleague, Richard. So I'd now like to hand over to Richard and Margaret. Diolch yn fawr.
Well, hello everyone. I think I've got the best job of the event today because I get to chat to Margaret. And as Helena said, his story was part of the Leave No One Behind report, and I'm sure that many of you have read it. And it was very moving, very inspiring. And I think it gave a real insight into, what life has been like for lots of older people throughout Wales, where they felt, the support that they relied on has kind of slipped away, and they've seen, massive changes due to the restrictions. So yeah, I'm going to ask Mary a few questions about what things have been like since she wrote the story for us. So I'm just going to jump straight in. Say welcome, Margaret.
Hello.
How are you?
Morning. I'm so glad to be here. Bore da yn Gymraeg I bawb.
It's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for being involved today. So yeah, my first question really was, so how have you and your husband been managing since you shared your story for the report in August? Has there been anything that you've struggled with in particular over the last few months, or has there been anything that's been particularly good?
Well, we've struggled on, we've been together a long time, so we sort of mutually supportive. He asks and I do. That's the sort of thing that happens. But we've had things that go wrong. Obviously, everything does go wrong. I've had to give up driving because I've gone much weaker since I didn't feel I had the control. So I voluntarily give up driving. Went for a checkup for the cancer I had on my head there, and we found that it had to be taken from there, hence the curly mop hasn't been cut. What else have we had awful? We couldn't get podiatry. I've had to go private now because it was 5 months for Ken and things were getting really bad, and it was 4 months for me. And we gave up on the NHS and we went to Age Concern through help through Age Concern, and we had a delightful Irish boy came, Waterford boy. But what I can't understand is if there's somebody private allowed to come in, Richard, why is it that the NHS foot care people? Because I got problems with my right foot, which I always need because I got peripheral neuropathy, I need the nerve testing. Well, I only had the toenails done and the calluses attended to. I've not had that part of the work done. And I think that's just been abandoned. But we've all got feet, we can have false teeth, but there's nobody going to give us false teeth. False feet they go wrong. And the NHS could be looking at an epidemic of sepsis, because that's what will arise with poor circulation and foot problems. But that's the awful bit. We've had nice things happening as well.
So could you tell us a little bit about the nice things?
Well, one good thing, I had 2 hours respite. My brother took my husband to do the graves and I was in the house on my own. Well, I felt I'd gone deaf. I didn't know what to do for about the first 20 minutes because nobody, there was no Ken noise. There was no sort of rustling in drawers and prowling around and opening and shutting doors and can I help and that sort of thing, and where is this and where is that? So that background noise went, and it was completely unnerving. I felt as if I'd been abandoned. So about an hour after they had gone, I thought, well, I better get coffee or something on for them when they came back. And they came back, and that was my 2 hours break. So that was rather nice. And then, of course, people started coming in. People who we were very wary at first, and I was asking people sort of, I got what I call my Parazone cloth, and as soon as anybody's come and gone, I'm round the handles, and like Mrs. Mop around the place having a go, But and then my cleaner came back. That was a huge, wonderful day that was, and then of course I started getting in the odd bits and pieces that hadn't been done. I could replace items of clothing. We got some stuff off to the charity shop. Gardener came in and sorted everything out and given us instructions, And we've had the drive pressure wash, all the things that were worrying me. Like we got done it in between what I think is lockdown 1 and lockdown 2. So that's all been, it's a relief when you're having things like that done,
Yeah.
And then the Tour de France came late. So we had the Tour de France sandwiches on the trolley and pedaling away, the 2 of us together. And lovely, enjoyed that. Nothing else much has happened except, the chapel. They've gone back in the chapel. I haven't gone back. And a lot of my older friends haven't gone back. But the chapel has done marvellously well. They've got sort of male usherettes telling the ones who are active, go upstairs, and the ones who need to stay downstairs. And they've done that wonderfully well. And of course, the chapel is a big part of my support. And I can't. So we've all been going strong. A hilarious Zoom on a Wednesday night. We were trying to think of the Welsh last night for multitasking. So I'm sticking to multitasking.
Just to pick up on what you said about the support you get from the church there. So you said in your story that, you know, one of the things about lockdown was that it kind of pulled the rug from underneath you and your husband in terms of that support network. So could you tell us a little bit more about that network and who was in it and the ways that they helped you?
Well, overnight, you know, it wasn't only me. I'm not only speaking about me, I'm speaking for all of us. Everything we relied on, it was stopped like that. And, you know, many people didn't know where to turn. They didn't know what to do, who to ask. No one could come. Even such, you know, simple things, you just couldn't do them. Well, I rely on Doreen, my cleaner, and she, you know, I mean, this is a woman who can go through a pair of marigolds in a month. You know, she cleans you to within an inch of your life. And so I lost Doreen, and straight away we've got to clean. Now, we're not up to that. We haven't been doing it for years. And then I lost Helen coming in. Now, Helen doesn't only do the shopping. Ken is very good at pulling down the vertical blinds. So Helen comes in with a glue gun and fixes them up again. Okay. We lost things like that. My curtains couldn't be changed. My spring cleaning couldn't be done. Cupboards couldn't be done. I can't get into low cupboards, and I dare not let him go in there because things will come out and they never go back, or he'll save them in the garage. You see, you can't let Ken loose on anything because he squirrels things and he shuffles things all around you. You don't know where things are. All that went wrong. All the hands-on stuff went. Then the gardener didn't know whether he could come, and we ended up talking through the window, you know, and he didn't know. And then I at that time, I was afraid to go outside the door. So I couldn't go and say to him, well, that needs doing, that needs doing. And Malcolm didn't quite know how the tip was going to work. So he couldn't take things. And then Clive, the window cleaner, he didn't come for a while. And then the people who come in, people who just post letters and bring something in, or if you've forgotten something. But the worst thing is that I got a niece, age 72, and she pops over quite frequently. And to have not been able to see Lynn was, I know what other people, she's not my daughter, but she's in effect. She and Helen are like a daughter and a granddaughter. And I lost those, and it was terrible. It was really awful. I felt bereft. And I know Ken relies on them. And then we had just set up a befriending service with Ken. He'd been out with a lovely man once. They went to Swansea Market, brought me home faggots and daffodils. What more can a woman ask?
Wow.
And that was all stopped, you see. And we were just getting into that. And then, of course, Elaine James, so she comes in, my support worker. Couldn't see Elaine, could speak to her on the phone, speak to her on, but it's not the same. You know, the physical. I missed the physical. I missed the interaction. I'm a people person, and to have people taken away from you and not being able to be taken out, that was awful, really. You know, it felt like the worst type of abandonment. We were like Robinson Crusoe and Man Friday, you know, bit of a sex change going on there. But that's what we were like, desert island people. And then, of course, Ken was very worried. He couldn't understand what was worried, you know, what was happening.
Yeah.
And as much as you explain to him once, an hour later, you've got to explain it all again. So I just turned it all off. And we kept looking at things like, you know, innocuous things. I know the price of every antique. Don't go selling anything before you ask me.
I'll make sure that I do. So you talked there about just before about how you managed to get people coming back in and things had started sort of moving again. So as we're kind of looking now at further restrictions and things like that, do you feel better prepared to cope with the kind of months ahead now?
I feel the inevitability of it now. I've seen it coming on. I've even got a Christmas pudding. You might not believe it, but it's arrived. It arrived yesterday. I can see this happening, rolling forward. And I've accepted it, but I am of that temperament. Other people are not of that temperament. The thing that keeps my husband and I going is that we've got a mutual sense of humor, which thank God he hasn't lost.
Oh,
And, you know, that keeps us going, but I am not in the house on my own. I know friends now who've anticipated this in the last week. I've got a friend who's gone up to Worcester to be with her daughter because she cannot take it anymore. She's gone before it happens. As she said to me, I've jumped out of the plane before it's crashed, she said to me. And that's where she's gone. And I don't blame her either, because it is very, very demoralizing. You're like a hermit, and you feel as if you're being punished for something you haven't done when you're on your own, and people can come.
Yeah. So one of the things you spoke about in your story was...
Are we all right? I haven't.
Oh, no, that's fine. Sorry, I thought I'd lost you.
I haven't touched anything. My hands are on
that's
my
fine.
knees.
That's absolutely fine. You're back. Great. Yeah. So in your story in the report, you talked about one of the good things about lockdown being that it made you knuckle down with your iPad, and you picked up some new skills on that. So I was going to say, what would you say to someone who was nervous about getting online or thought that being online wasn't for them? Because, you know, I know it's made a big difference to you staying connected with people and lots of others. So what would you say to those? What advice would you give people who may be a bit unsure?
Look on it as learning to drive a car. It is terrifying. The worst bit is getting the equipment into the house because you know nothing about it at all. Realize that you don't know anything and that you're not stupid. No one can know anything, everything. You have to ask the younger generation. And actually, the younger they are, the better they are at telling you, because they know exactly what to do and they don't give you too many explanations. They just say, put that in there, do that, press that. And you don't want to be told too many whys and wherefores. The other thing is to learn how to turn the darn thing on and off, because very often that's the worst part of it. And then learn one thing, like YouTube, learn one thing, learn how to call yourself a bit of music and to change the music if you don't like it, and then turn it off. And keep doing that all of the time. It's only by repetition. And after all, it's only like opening a door and closing the door, isn't it, when you're doing anything? And if you do it wrong, you're by yourself. Who knows? You can't break.
Exactly, yeah.
But right, now I've got somebody now who teaches me on a Tuesday night, and her name is Amy. And she's a young mother with 2 children, and she volunteered at the beginning of lockdown because she wanted to do something, and what you could do is teach IT. So what I do is the things I haven't been able to do in a week, I got a little list for her, and we go through it. And I've learned lots of things. I've learned heaps of things. And I didn't know about, what's that thing now? It can go to, not trash, what does it go to? The
recycle bin, is it?
Oh, I know all about the recycling bin, because I've been years. But what's that other thing it can go to on the side now? Emails can go straight to trash, is it? Something like that.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
I didn't know. Oh, I had a pile of those in there. I didn't see that. Well, all of that, but you know, it's quite exciting when you find something new. But like what I'm doing now is what I need to do. You haven't got to do it all. Nobody's going to do it all. Gosh, Bill Gates doesn't know bits of what's going on, does he? And you're going to realize, you know, you're never going to know it all. You're going to know, only learn the bit you want and use it like a tool. It's an inanimate object, and don't be afraid of it. Engage with it, and you know, swear at it. I often have under my breath. Mind, don't say it out loud, and in Welsh, so they only can understand it between me and him. But you know, it's the most irritating thing to be sort of stuck there and frozen and not knowing what's going to happen next. And you think you've done something wrong, and it's not you at all. It's the way the program's been written by somebody who doesn't think like you. And then all you've got to do is then learn to think like them. And I got to that stage of philosophy now. I think, oh, well, I can't do today, I'll do tomorrow.
I think that's, really good advice for us all, isn't it, really, actually? So is there, one thing in particular, and it's probably not, it's probably lots of different things, but is there something in particular that over the last few months would have made a big positive difference, that would have, made your life a lot easier over the last few months? Was it that support being able to be available to you, or?
Oh, that's invaluable. People coming into the house is invaluable. A visit to an older person isn't only for that day. You see, we had a link in our Zoom service. We had a link of 5 old ladies in a care home down in Newcastle Emlyn, and our secretary linked them in with our service. And Mrs. Betty Davis, our deceased, our old minister's, emeritus minister's wife, she and 4 friends joined us in the service, and that they talked about that all the week. Well, when somebody comes in to see you live and you have a visitor, and it buoys you up, you're preparing because you know someone's coming, you have the delight of somebody being with you, and then you have the pleasure of thinking of the conversation afterwards, and then you've got something to speak on the phone to other people about. You can say, oh, so-and-so called to see me. You've got news. I'm like a Greek. If somebody comes in and gives me news, I'm listening all the time because it's something I don't know and I want to take on board. And that is the sort of thing that's been invaluable. I would have already, I don't know if I told you, but not being able to drive is a huge difference for Ken and I. We can't go anywhere. I'm a bit of a handful to take out, I must admit. But we would have liked to have had a little, somebody said, would you like a car ride and a tea out? I would have loved that. But that didn't happen. So what? Well, we managed on our own. But it would have been nice to have had. But everybody was so busy catching up and trying to think now, can I do this safely and that safely? They don't sort of think to themselves then when they've got a full life of their own, but other lives are perhaps a little bit less full, and nice things could be done quite easily just for the want of thought. But there we are, we're not all the same. Young people's lives are very full.
Well, and that's what I was going to move on to for my final question, really. So you mentioned in your story in the report that lots of younger people had turned to you for emotional support. So yeah, what advice would you give to younger people who are going through this now and maybe just starting their way in the world?
Well, if I gave a young person advice, I'd be very presumptuous because they seem to know everything, don't they? Sort of when they're young, they feel as if people at our age are over the hill. I mean, I know when I was a teenager and a young married woman, I thought my mother was really she didn't know anything at all. When I was 18, I thought how stupid my mother was. By the time I was 28, I thought she was brilliant. And she got better all my life. But what could you tell a young person? Well, nothing ever stays the same. What the 18-year-olds are going through now with being unable to take up their university places, or their way in life that they had planned has gone to pieces. Well, that happens to a generation, the young people of the 1930s. I mean, at 8-year-old, my husband and I, we didn't have a school. I went to 5 schools in 3 years. Well, it doesn't stop you if you want to learn, if you want to go somewhere. When you're young, you see, you're like sort of going into the Nile Delta, aren't you? You're coming in some way or other, and you don't know the river that you're going to get into, the big river of life. And you want everything to happen at once. It's not going to happen at once. It's going to happen in a developmental way. And what is happening now will move on. There will be a new sort of arrangement in society, but it will be there. And just like the young people who are coming along in the 50s and 60s, they are going to be the ones who are going to need the skills to rebuild. And you can grab your skills from anywhere. You haven't got to wait to be shown. Good heavens, anybody can pick up a book and learn. And you can go on WikiHow. I can go on WikiHow. I found heaps of things to do on WikiHow.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
But you can go on to things like that. And you can do things for yourself. You haven't got to wait to have things put into your hands. And when you're young, don't think that everyone wants to know your opinion, because most people don't, you know, and you're not the center of the universe. You are the center of your universe, but you're not really. Nobody bothers about you out of your own little crowd. You're a very small coal indeed. Now, if you can take that on board and read a good newspaper so that you get conversational powers, and walk and swim, 2 things that you can do cheaply all your life, and realize that if God meant you to have a mobile phone in your hand all the time, he'd have made a little pocket there for it to be put so that you could do things with 2 hands. What is the point of a selfie? You know what you look like. If you're a boy, I would say to him, don't have an eagle tattooed across on your chest, because by the time you're 70, you look like the dying swan. Or similarly, a rose for a young lady in a sort of in a strategic position, because you'll be wrinkled, it'll have to be ironed every morning. By the time you're old, a tattoo will look ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And don't make the mistake that I did. Don't start going out with a partner who was about 5'9" and end up with somebody 6'2½", or you're never going to have room in the bed. What else advice can I give them? Just be yourself.
I think that's all good advice.
Personality. Find your way forward.
That's brilliant. I think that's advice we can all take on board, really. So yeah, I'm aware of the time now, so I think we're going to have to call that, bring that to an end. So thank you ever so much, Margaret. I can see the comments that have been ticking up, and I know you've inspired lots of people today, and they've really valued hearing from you. You know, in your story, you said good things also happened against expectation. And I think one of the best things to come out of all of this is being able to meet with you today and speak with you and hear from you. And I know that the 300 odd people that we've got involved today will have taken a huge amount from that. So thank you ever so much, Margaret. Thank you.
Well, I'm a very ordinary lady, Richard, and there are heaps about. If only people would knock on our front doors, we'd welcome them in with open arms. Thank you for having me. It's been
Thank you very much,
pleasure.
Margaret. Thank you. Take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Richard. Wow, wasn't that amazing? I'm sure everybody loved that, and there were so many phrases that are staying with us. And just to let Margaret know, a number of people have been saying you should have your own chat show, your own YouTube channel, your own radio show. They want you to interview all the leaders of the world, which sounds like a pretty good idea to me. Someone said we all need a Margaret in our lives. And I think your line about faggots and daffodils, what more can a woman ask for, is probably going to be the line of the day. And someone suggested that should be the title of our next report. So it has been fantastic to hear you, and thank you for giving your time, which I know is very precious, and you have a lot on your plate to deal with. So thank you so much, Margaret, and it's been a real pleasure to hear you today. We're going to move on now to our panel discussion. And I'm delighted to welcome 4 members who are going to join our panel today. So let me introduce them first of all. We have Councillor Hugh David, who is the Health and Social Care spokesperson for the Welsh Local Government Association and leader of Bridgend Council. We have Rocio Cervantes, who is the Chief Executive of East Wales. Rocio is also a Wales committee member of the Equality and Human Rights Commission and chair of the Welsh Refugee Council. We have Professor Tom Crick, who's Professor of Digital Education and Policy at Swansea University and is also an independent member of the Swansea University Health Board, and Rachel Rowlands, who's the Chief Executive of Age Connects Morgannwg and also chairs the Regional Partnership Board. So a very warm welcome to all of you. And each of the panel members is going to speak for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to open up for questions and discussion. So first of all, can I ask Hugh to open the proceedings? Over to you.
Bore da, and thank you, Commissioner, for the invitation to take part in today's event. I was going to suggest actually that we scrap this part of the seminar and we just listen to Margaret, because I could listen to Margaret all day. I think she was absolutely inspirational. but unfortunately, you're gonna have to listen to me for a couple of minutes. So I'll try and keep my my comments short so that we can have a good debate and discussion later. The report that you've produced, Helene, has given us some real food for thought, and I was really pleased to be able to invite Helena to a recent meeting of cabinet members for social care from across Wales, where we discussed the report and some of the implications for local authorities across Wales. Undoubtedly, the pandemic has shone a brighter spotlight on mental well-being and mental health services. Councils have always had an important role in improving and maintaining people's mental wellness from childhood to old age, but COVID has proven the value of this more than ever before. In particular, cabinet members were keen to stress the need to intervene early to tackle loneliness and social isolation, and that was wonderfully articulated by Margaret. The pressures that the national lockdown and now local restrictions have put on people, particularly people that live alone or have caring responsibilities, have been huge, and we need to be vigilant around ensuring that we support those people and take the impact of that into account when decisions made around restrictions in the future. And whilst the focus of today is on recovery, I think the recent rapidly growing number of cases in Wales and the local restrictions that are now in place across most of Wales is a warning that this crisis is not over. The pandemic is not over. We may be facing our worst days, unfortunately, and we are going to have to learn to live with this virus, and councils are working hard to try and do that. We've obviously had a key role around the developing the tracing teams, supporting vulnerable people, ensuring that businesses comply with the public protection rules, and reopening services and reopening them safely to our communities. So we've been at the forefront of the response to COVID, and we'll continue to do that. And older and vulnerable people have been our highest priority, and we've made some difficult decisions around services, but always when we've made those decisions, we have put the health of our communities first, and that has resulted in some difficult decisions and some trade-offs, and we'll continue to make those difficult decisions to protect people from a deadly virus. We are going to have to learn to live with COVID, and it'll be interesting to hear people's views and see their questions today on how we do that. And what we're going to have to try and do is make our people, our communities more resilient as we face future waves. And the report has highlighted a couple of key areas where we need to do that. So digital inclusion is vital now, particularly for older people, many of whom are still digitally excluded, and particularly if further restrictions are put in place. So there are huge challenges ahead for public services and communities in Wales, but we are well placed to rise to those challenges, particularly if we work with, and I'm really pleased that Rachel is here today, particularly if we work with the third sector, the voluntary sector, with our charities. They've got a vital role to play with us in ensuring that our communities are more resilient. And our communities need to be more age friendly, because that doesn't just benefit older people, it benefits everyone. The steps that are proposed and the action that we need to take is important for the whole of society, and that's why we're committed in local government to making that a reality. And COVID-19 is not a reason for us to not do that. It's a reason for us to accelerate our work. It's more important than ever that we make sure that our communities and our services are focused on the needs of older people, because the vulnerability and risk is serious, and we need to provide as much support as we can for it. Is going to be some very difficult times ahead. So thank you, Helena.
Thank you very much, Hugh, and very good to hear you talk about the importance of age-friendly communities, actually, and that where we are now is a reason to accelerate that work. So I'm sure we'll come back to that in discussion. Can I just remind people, if you are using the chat function, can you make sure that you indicate all panelists and attendees on it? So if you tab that bit, it'll mean that everyone can see what you're saying. So thank you very much for giving the kind of local government view of things. Now I'm delighted to welcome Rocio Cervantes, the Chief Executive of East Wales, to give her perspective. Rocio, over to you.
Thank you so much, Helena. It's fantastic to be with you all today on UN Day for Older People. And it's fantastic to have such a large audience, even though I can't see any of you. I can see there's over 300 people on the call. So really, really pleased to have this opportunity. And today is also the start of Black History Month, which is, you know, an important coincidence, I suppose. The charity that I head up supports ethnic minority people across Wales. And we know that Wales is an increasingly diverse country, with approximately 6% of the population coming from a non-white, non-British background. And clearly that diversity is increasing amongst older people also. So it's very important, and I'm really, really pleased to be here to highlight this particular population. It's not new that Wales is diverse. Wales, immigration and diversity in Wales has been a reality for centuries. We can see the Somali community who have lived here for 4 or 5 generations. We know the history of places like Cardiff Bay, previously called Tiger Bay. You know, we can think of people like Shirley Bassey, who are really iconic people in Wales, who have a mixed ethnic heritage. We've had Italian, Polish communities settle in Wales, Chinese, and more recently Middle Eastern. So it's a rich melting pot, but people you know, if they're lucky, if we're the lucky ones, we do get older, and this is important to recognise that the older population in Wales does include a growing proportion of people who are not, possibly were not born here, or may have been born here but have different cultural, religious, linguistic backgrounds. They have the same needs as everybody else in terms of physical, emotional needs, that, you know, very similar to what we heard so beautifully illustrated by Margaret. I really enjoyed that that contribution. But I think just additional dimensions to be aware of. So language and culture can be barriers to accessing care or support if that hasn't been thought about or put in place. Equally, food is equally crucial. You know, we all need food to stay alive, and so it's important to think about how food's provided to older people who are maybe being looked after in care homes, or, you know, having foods delivered to them for various reasons, how that needs to be appropriate and sensitive to different cultural and sometimes religious needs. We're seeing, you know, increasing levels of dementia as we are amongst the general older population. But if we think about the kind of dementia support that is very popular and effective for older people with dementia, which relies on things like music and songs from the past, we maybe need to think a little bit about how we can make some of that provision and support culturally sensitive. So we may need to think about bringing music or support from different countries to support that certain populations of older people. And it's quite important as well that we think about how we upskill the care workforce to think about these things and to be culturally sensitive, as well as trying to diversify the current care workforce. Although, having said that, it is already a relatively diverse group, which, you know, which relies on people giving their skills who come from many different countries, and you know, that's a very important for us to remember and recognise that contribution that people from all over the world are making. We've seen in this pandemic, you know, it's become a truism by now, but it has definitely shone a light on pre-existing and long-standing inequalities. We've seen a particular unfortunate detrimental impact on ethnic minority communities. We know that people from Black and minority ethnic communities have approximately twice the risk of dying from coronavirus, very sadly, and there are multiple factors to explain that, but one of the factors relates to housing conditions, to multi-generational homes, to overcrowding. So it's many factors have played a part, but we know that cumulatively they have resulted in an increased risk of the virus on ethnic minority populations in particular. And it was also been mentioned today about digital exclusion. That has definitely played a part for older people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. If you, you know, in exactly the same way that Margaret described, but with an additional language barrier as well as the digital barriers. None of these are insurmountable. There have been many innovative responses to these challenges, many community projects organizing for volunteers or befrienders or community networks to visit older people, to explain to them how to download WhatsApp, for example. And you know, the innovation and the community response that we've seen has been incredible, really. So we need to value and celebrate that. And so I'm just really glad to see that communication and inclusion has been highlighted as one of the key themes within the Leave No One Behind report. I think it's certainly one of the crucial messages that I would like to give everybody today, that inclusion is digital, cultural, linguistic, financial. We need to think about the spectrum and the rainbow of older people living in Wales. And certainly as we go forward, as we progress, that diversity of the older population is only going to increase. So I'll stop there because I'm sure there's many more wonderful contributions to come. But thank you for the opportunity, Helena, and wonderful to hear everybody so far. Thank you.
Joe, Gadael, thank you so much. Fantastic input there, and I think talking about the sort of the rainbow nature of our older population and the increasing diversity, and the importance not just of things like digital inclusion, but cultural inclusion and linguistic and financial, really, really well made. And we have seen, as you rightly said, those inequalities really come to the fore, that people who've been experiencing that inequality and disadvantage and discrimination, actually, that's really been felt even more during this time. So incredibly important that we, in all that we do, we recognise the diversity of the population, we recognise those people who are already experiencing disadvantage, and look at how we can do more in that. I'm sure we'll come back to those issues of communication and the challenges there, because it has been a big theme that's come out from many groups of older people. So I'd like to move on now and invite Tom Crick, Professor of Digital Education and Policy at Swansea University, to talk to us now. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Elena. Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here. There's so many things I probably want to kind of touch upon, so I'm just going to try and give a rapid sort of spread across some of the key kind of topic areas. And I think it's a really, really strong panel, and obviously framed really well by Margaret's fantastic kind of introduction. I suppose wholeheartedly support the recent report from the Commissioner. I think it really touches upon the immediacy of some of the issues, and I suppose cuts across a number of the areas that I'm specifically interested in. It reflects the kind of wider demographic changes that we're seeing in the UK and Wales in particular. It resonates with the kind of the COVID context, and I suppose I'm a computer scientist by background, so naturally I'm going to talk about the kind of wider digital and technological aspects of this, but I think it also cuts across my health board role. So I sit on Swansea Bay University Health Board, and I'm also a commissioner of the National Infrastructure Commission for Wales. So thinking about the kind of long-term challenges and opportunities for Wales when we think about those kind of 5 to 30-year period around economic and environmental infrastructure, and that is about people, that is about communities, that is about connectivity, and it kind of cuts across some of the issues that we've already spoken about. And I suppose in particular, from a health and social care perspective, this is the opportunity to really think about that system and service redesign piece. So it is about citizen-centered digital public services. It links back to some of the points that Margaret was raising, and around Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, but essentially bilingual digital public services. So people can access these key services in the language of their choice, where they are best able to do so, and it is best for them. I suppose I'll probably say this isn't just about technology. I think we can get probably overly focused on technology, and that can be quite detrimental. We recognise the wider impact of technology on our life. It affects society, culture, and the economy. It affects public discourse. It affects politics. It affects everything that we've seen of late. But I suppose it isn't just about the technology. And I think that piece around kind of digital exclusion, or rather digital inclusion, I'd probably immediately signpost some of the amazing work of Digital Communities Wales, and the recent report, Digital Inclusion in Health and Care in Wales, which gives some really good examples of what can be done. And I think it looks at this sort of co-construction, multi-organizational approach to solving some of these really kind of challenging issues. And a good example of that would be their Digital Companions work, which was a Bevan exemplar for 2019. That was done with the Bevan Health Board. It kind of shows the opportunity you can have around having a meaningful and genuine impact on people's lives, particularly older people's lives, and it isn't unduly focused on just giving them some kit. I think that kind of wider training, community, social kind of connectivity piece is really, really important too. And I think, kind of linking back to that kind of main point around, it is about this social, physical, and technological connectivity. There are the opportunity around it's around recognizing the different needs of different groups. Some of my kind of recent work over the past few years has been around kind of major curriculum reform in Wales. So thinking about kind of, I suppose, the start that young people have to their lives. But I think actually that wider lifelong learning piece, and it is about skills and training. It is about providing opportunities for everyone across their entire life, and recognize it isn't just about young people from the age of 3 to 16 or 18. So actually, how do we recognize that there is a wider societal upskilling, education, skills and training challenge that is really, really important, particularly for the accessibility and the inclusion aspects of technology, because there are significant barriers, which is, some of it's infrastructural around availability and accessibility of connectivity, but it is around confidence and capability with using some of these key tools and technologies and services. I suppose a key point that I would recognise is around, there are some big picture stuff around. It is about the environment in which we live. It's about designing the built environment for different people, and certainly for recognising the specific needs and requirements of older people. So actually, when we move into this kind of smart infrastructure, smart cities environments, actually recognising that there are different demographics who have different and specific needs, and we have to make sure that is much more inclusive from a design. Our inclusive design for the built environment, and recognising again much more citizen and person centred. I think this will probably kind of come up as we discussed with the panel, but around the importance of engagement and collaboration. This is clearly a multi-organisational, multidisciplinary type approach, and I think that kind of cuts across role for government, roles for charity and third sector, and actually probably more importantly that co-construction, co-creation with older people themselves. So actually the kind of citizen civic engagement piece to make sure that people are directly involved in what they are doing, and it actually makes a difference for their own individual lives. And I suppose finally, essentially the importance of this for Wales. I mean, I think there's a number of kind of interesting challenges, but opportunities that Wales will face kind of going forwards over the coming years. We know there are obviously COVID is still very much with us. Things like Brexit, what does that mean for public services, for society, culture and the economy? I suppose we would probably say, this is about people, rural, urban, it's about people, it's about communities, it is about the culture and economy, and essentially the future success and resilience of Wales will be determined in a large part by its ageing population. So how do we have this coherent response to ageing? And this isn't about addressing some of these problems in silos. So it is much more combined and sort of integrated approach to addressing some of these from a policy making and political perspective. So big challenges ahead, as the report outlines, but there are some big opportunities for Wales as a policy test bed, as a small nation, to do some of these things at pace and at scale, and to have a really meaningful impact. So look forward to exploring some of these opportunities as we go through the panel.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Tom. Really helpful, and I think that sense of we can do things here in Wales at scale and at pace is really positive, and really valued you talking about not just the technological connectivity but social and physical. That's very much what we heard from Margaret earlier, and I think that issue around how we make sure that while we focus on digital inclusion, we don't exclude those other elements of inclusion as well. So thank you very much for that. And our final panelist now, I'm delighted to welcome Rachel Rowlands, who's the Chief Executive of Age Connects Organic. Rachel, over to you.
Thanks, Helena. Bore da. I think it's still morning. Yep. Good morning, everybody. So I suppose my perspective on this comes very much as the Chief Exec of a local Age Connects organisation, which may be more widely known to some of you as formally as Age Concern. We provide services across the Cwmtaf Megannog region, and I hear feedback from my team members every day about the impact that the fear of the virus, but also the impact of the restrictions on daily life, and what those impacts have been. And it is so broad, it is so wide ranging, and everybody has experienced this in a different way. They may all be older people that we support, but they've all experienced the last 6 months, and areas that are now that have gone back into restrictions, they continue to experience that. And I think the second time round is actually worse in some respects, because it's so localized, and the feedback that we're getting from older people living in those areas that are experiencing the current restrictions is that it feels much more closer to home, which I think is really interesting. People know it's in their villages, they know that it's in their towns, they're not just, it's not just a case of saying, you know, you can go out and shop, and they say, but we don't want to because we're afraid to go out and shop. And I think that that adds another dimension to the impact that I think we're going to see having you know, quite far-reaching and long-term effects. So, Commissioner, the report that you've produced says everything that we know is happening, and asks for changes to be made through your recommendations. So the report is welcome and certainly timely. I mean, the big question is, are we heading into effectively another national lockdown as local authorities place restrictions? And I know that we are trying through messaging not to refer to the local restrictions as other lockdowns. We are saying that locally, we're saying that we're under restrictions, but you know, I think just under half of the local authority areas in Wales, or it may be half now, are under restrictions, with more to come, no doubt, as the virus travels. I could see lots of information and lots of questions and comments in the chat about the lack of community engagement, you know, the activity that's still not available through community centres, and probably in the main through local authority run community centres. And I know that local authorities are, you know, trying their hardest to get those community venues back up and running, so that people can continue to receive the support that they want from the people that they know and in the way that they want it. So that face-to-face is very, very important. And once a week, when I finished the day job, I telephone befriend a lady that lives in Mountain Ash, just over the mountain from me. She lives alone, she's unmarried, she has no children. And, you know, we talk for sometimes half an hour, sometimes up to an hour, about how she feels and how she's coping with it all. And, you know, what she misses is the chapel. She misses the community centre. She misses the library, even though the library, thankfully, has reopened with excellent safety, health and safety measures in place. But what she says is that she just goes and picks up her book in a sanitised bag, and she gets back in her car and she goes home. And what she misses is chatting about the book that she's chosen that time with other people in the library. And you know, as Margaret you know, said it much more eloquently than I could, you know, it's that kind of contact that people are really missing, and that's what's having the impact on their emotional well-being. And I think as well, you know, in terms of what we're getting is people saying, you know, to our support workers, can you just take me out for a walk? Because what I'm really missing is going out safely and feeling that I'm okay, and I'm out and I'm not coming into contact with anybody, but I feel like I need to stretch my legs. And for lots of older people who may struggle with their mobility, that kind of support is really important. I think, you know, the question I keep asking myself is, what price are we going to pay in the long term for all of the restrictions that are in place? You know, how much of local transformation programme funding, ICF funding, if there's any left, and other core funding, mainstream funding from local authorities and health boards is now going to be diverted into genuine preventative support. There's lots of money going into social prescribing, and you know, that has its place. But if there's nowhere to prescribe to, if third sector organisations, community groups aren't able to actually function because they've either folded or they haven't got the means and the core sustainable funding to deliver those services, then actually what I think we are doing is just storing up problems that will eventually reach the GP, will reach the hospital door, will reach the single point of access and the assessment process. And my fear is that we will, without even realising it, we will push people into a system that is trying to actually not encourage them to come into the system. You know, once you're in the system, it is much more time consuming. It's much more difficult, and often I think individual cases tend to get worse once they're in the system, because you have to comply with all of the various assessment process. So I would really like to see some of that that approach to assessment, which we know has been affected. You know, a lot of assessments were either stopped or were reduced, and lots of people's packages of care were stopped or reduced. We need that to be addressed quite quickly, but we also need some investment in finding out exactly what the impact has been on people who are not in the system, because ultimately we really want to try and reduce the risk or prevent them going in into local authority or health systems. With regards to digital, I mean, I think it's interesting that all of the comments in the chat, you know, recognise the importance of digital. Margaret recognised the importance of digital connections. But again, I think it's going to require huge investment, and it's something that, in fact, my own organisation struggled to adapt to as an organisation, because our MO, our model, is face-to-face. And so it isn't just a case of making sure that older people are equipped with the kit and the knowledge and the training and the understanding. The organisations that are there to support them need to also have that investment. And we were very fortunate that Digital Communities Wales, which I know are cited in the report, you know, they were an incredible support to us and help, and continue to be through the Pathfinder project that we have with them. I just wanted to pick up on the point about, this is from a regional partnership board sort of test, trace and protect point of view, if I may, very quickly. You know, we've talked about how different groups within communities are communicated with. One of the things that I often say to colleagues in public health when we're talking about messaging about the virus and about the restrictions and the guidelines and the testing requirements is, when we're in that conversation as public health professionals or people who see that guidance all of the time, it is the easiest thing in the world to understand, and even I sometimes am not sure. But when we are trying to convey that message to people whose first language isn't English, or people who have additional learning needs, people who have a cognitive issue or dementia, people who are just not connected in the same way as those of us who live and breathe this every day, we need to take a step out of where we are and say, okay, you know, how are we going to get these messages across? How are we going to support older people to assimilate all of the information they get through the media, some of which isn't always correct, some of which is dramatized or sensationalized, and it all adds to the fear. But I think that there's a grant available from Welsh Government to support BAME support workers across Wales to make sure that we connect to BAME groups, and that we make sure that we understand what their challenges are culturally, you know, from a language point of view and economically. And you know, a lot of the work that we need to do is with the elders of those community groups to make sure that they feel that they can filter that through into their wider families and wider networks.
Rachel,
so thank you. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. That's fantastic, and some really important points there that you've picked up. I think particularly this issue about making sure that we have those preventative services in place. You put it very well in terms of social prescribing. You need things to prescribe to. And I think just your reflections on, as we enter the second wave, how people feel it is closer to home, and those issues of fear are coming back out. So we have a few minutes now for questions to the panel. So just to reassure everyone that's been posting questions, if we don't come to them today, we'll seek to provide a follow-up from today where we can answer some of those questions, and we'll also share some of the very helpful links that you've been given to other sources of material. So what I want to start with actually is this issue of communication, because it's come up a lot. Rocio, you talked about it, Rachel, you did, and it's something that's come up to me a lot from older people, that the messaging isn't straightforward. that sometimes the messaging seems quite confused. If you're not online, it can be difficult to find out what's going. And one of the questions was also about if you're suffering from cognitive impairment, how can you make sure that the messages are getting to you? So I'd really like to get some suggestions of answers and ways forward on this. So I'm going to come to Rocio first on this one, particularly for BAME elders. How can we make sure that the communications are improved?
Thank you, Helena. I think it relates to the point that Rachel was just making about the need to work with groups which are engaged with diverse and BAME older people. There has to be a stronger kind of two-way communication. There needs to be resourcing put in place to make that happen from mainstream organisations, particularly, and also some resourcing to community groups on the ground. This engagement and this conversation can't just happen, you know, in an ad hoc way, or, you know, once a year or once a month. It needs to be integrated and planned and just become part of business as usual. Ideally, the workforce of charities and organisations supporting older people would become more diverse itself, with more languages within the team, so that it's not always about, you know, reaching out and trying to find so-called hard to reach, and it's about integrating for the long term, making making the them part of us. You know, it's a long-term goal. I think short-term, it's about putting resources in place to make that communication happen.
But as you put it very well, though, it's about building it so it becomes the way in which we work, and that we as organisations, we become more diverse and our communications become more diverse. Rachel, can I come back to you on this point about communication as well? One of the things that's been said to me is it'd be really helpful if some of the sort of communications from the Welsh Government were specifically sort of directed more to older people. Do you think that would be helpful if some of the television briefings, for example, included a slot where the First Minister was directly talking to older people?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, just to give you some idea of what's going on as part of the Test, Trace and Protect programmes across Wales. The protect element really is about making sure that people are as up to date and as fully engaged and understand what all of the messaging means. You know, you can go onto the .gov website and you can see one set of information. You might go onto the Public Health Wales website and you might see something else. And then locally, there will be messages that relate specifically, particularly now where you've got local restrictions, they'll relate to local restrictions. So it is a very confusing picture. And I think that it is such a fast moving situation as well. It's quite difficult to keep it all up to date and connected in the same way. But part of the Protect workstream, certainly in Cwmtaf Morgannwg, and if there are any colleagues on the webinar from any other TTP programmes, please feel free to put something in the chat. What we are trying to do, particularly through our third sector colleagues and working with our social care colleagues, is to take that fairly complex messaging and turn it into a what does this mean for me? So very much in the kind of what matters conversation is saying to people who call up. So if they call up through Age Connect, if they call up through Age Cymru helpline, if they get in touch through a Friend in Need programme, or any of the other services and support, the 50+ forums that exist, is that we say to them, okay, what is it that what is it you need help with? And we can try and work through based on their situation, because everybody's situation is different. So the guidance that I need and the information I might need might relate to something very specific. Can I spend time with my friends and family? Can I, but that does require a fairly significant mobilization of an already very, very, very busy and overstretched third sector and community group.
Yeah, and I know you and other charities and Age Cymru and others are doing a huge amount in terms of that information advice, but We also know that charities have been struggling during this time, particularly because some of the ways in which you can fundraise, like events and things, haven't been able to happen. So at a time of greater demand, it's also been quite challenging. I want to come on now to a point that a number of you have raised around community centres and how these can be opened up again and how our communities can be more age friendly. I'd like to come back to Hugh initially on this, if I may. How can we get to a place where some of those community centres can be opened safely again, and we can think about how we can really enable people to connect and as you were saying, Hugh, build on age friendly developments?
So originally the community centres were closed obviously on the basis of Welsh Government guidance. They have been reopened in lots of parts of Wales, and certainly Cefn Cribble Community Centre has reopened. I'm proud to voluntary chair the community association that's run that for 20 years. So you can come along for Pilates at the Cefn Cribble Community Centre if you like. The key aspect is that those community centres need to be managed very safely. Needs to be a proper risk assessment in place. Of course, the situation is evolving very quickly with the local restrictions. And I was just checking actually, because I saw the question. I think we need to make sure that the Welsh Government frequently asks questions for areas in and the local restrictions. That those frequently asked questions are updated to reflect the questions around community centres. But it's a very good question, because they are a vital part of the community infrastructure, particularly for older people.
Thank you, Hugh. And the other question that's come up quite a bit is about access to health services. We haven't talked about that much yet today, but I've certainly had a lot of feedback from older people who are struggling to get to see their GPs and struggling to access health services. So I don't know if any of the panel want to come on to this point about accessing health services and how that can be improved at the moment. Does anyone want to come in on that? Tom?
I'm happy to. Yeah, I think as a sort of general point around, I mean, I very much heard kind of what Margaret was saying, some of the challenges she'd had around accessing podiatry. I know some of the kind of discussions in the chat around kind of contacting GPs and getting appointments, and it can raise, can increase a lot of anxiety if you can't access kind of various types of health and social care when you need it. I think there's the kind of general point I would make is around using, if we are going to use the kind of COVID crisis for good, is around how can we fundamentally rethink some of the way that we've been providing some of these services. I think pragmatically we recognise that some types of services will never be able to catch up. So actually reverting back to how we were delivering them in January is unacceptable. So we do need to think about redesigning and rethinking how we provide certain health and social care services, particularly across the kind of health and social care continuum. So I think there is clearly a technological aspect to some of this. So actually, with the accessibility of GP appointments, I'm not saying that's the only way, but I think that's a way of making sure that people are able to access them in a much more timely fashion. And I suppose, coupled with that, we need to ensure that all kind of demographics are able to meaningfully engage with these services. That's not just from a sort of an age perspective, that's also from making sure it's bilingual, etc. But I think this is an opportunity about how we can think about outpatient stuff. How do you access GPs? More kind of community-based services, because otherwise, I think if we have the mindset of trying to go back to normal, that's not a good position to be in. We need to use this as an opportunity to really rethink how we can provide this. And I think that where we have that co-construction kind of engagement piece to make sure that older people and a range of different kind of demographics are meaningfully engaged in the actual design of these future services, rather than it being sort of done to them. It needs to be done with them.
Thank you, Tom. And I'm aware that we're almost coming to the end of time. I'm just going to ask Rachel to come in very quickly, if you may.
Yeah, just very quickly, and on the subject of podiatry, you know, I think that there's an Age Connect or an Age Cymru toenail cutting service in almost every local authority area in Wales, and they will be connected to their NHS podiatry teams to make sure that, you know, we are all trying to deliver support to those people that need it. Admittedly, you know, we are not chiropodists or podiatrists, so, you know, this is basic toenail cutting, but I would urge anybody that is, if they're concerned about somebody who is struggling to walk as a result of overgrown toenails in the last 6 months, and I suspect that there are many, please do check out your local Age Cymru or local Age Connect's toenail cutting service. I'm sure they'll be able to help.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And we are nearly at the end of time. So, well, not at the end of the whole time, as it were, but end of the time for this session. And just again, to reassure all of you that have been kindly putting things into the chat and into the questions, we will be producing a note following this meeting. So we will aim to reflect everything that you've been raising, and also do stay in touch with us. So if there's anything subsequently that you feel you'd really like to raise with us or suggest, then let us know. I'm going to ask now the panel to do something almost impossible, which is to take no more than 30 seconds each. And I will be timing you, and I will cut you off 30 seconds each with some final thoughts. And particularly, I'd like you to focus on action. So what can we do now? What are we doing now? So I'd like us to try and leave on a sort of positive tone if we can. So I wonder, Tom, if I could come to you first, then I'll come to Rossio, then Rachel, then Hugh. So Tom first, please.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I think I'd probably link back to the comments I raised around, you know, really successful projects like Digital Communities Wales. How can we, you know, the long-term sustainable funding to really meaningfully change behaviours, structures and cultures. So, you know, that is around the training piece, the upskilling piece. It is about getting into recognising the local, regional challenges that people have. So actually, it isn't just a one-size-fits-all approach across all of Wales. It's recognising the specificity of challenge that would be very different in Newport than it would be in Anglesey. So I think there are loads of examples, and I would kind of point to Digital Communities Wales as a really good example of that. And there's great work from across various health boards and different parts of the health and social care system. But I think, you know, there was a fair pushback in the chat around delivering stuff at pace and at scale. I think we need to be able, we need to do that rather than talk about doing that.
Great. Okay, so that's really helpful. And a shout out to Digital Communities Wales. And this importance about making sure things are relevant to the area, because Wales is a very diverse country. Thank you. Rossio.
Thank you. I think I would ask people to really find local groups working with BAME communities. There's a list on the East website if you want to have a look. We know there are about 120, 150 community groups working with BAME people across Wales. So find those groups, make connections with them, you know, have a two-way dialogue so that you can agree and decide what your local priorities are, come up with some solutions, and put some money into those solutions and make it happen.
Fantastic, thank you. Very practical, very good, and something everyone can do. That's wonderful. Hugh.
Yeah, thanks, Helena. I think we need to deliver digital inclusion as quickly as we can, and that's something you and I will pick up with Welsh Government. We need to get some funding in there ASAP. Just in terms of keeping in touch with older people, we rang everyone on the shielding programme. I think we've got to return to some of those traditional methods of communication, ringing people, and we wrote out to every household in Bridgend. Trouble is the rules are changing, but we've still got to return to some of those more traditional forms of contact. And then finally, I'll take back to colleagues about community centres. But just to remind everyone that most community centres are run by volunteers, and many of those volunteers are older people themselves. And I know from personal experience that they're nervous actually about opening their community centres in many cases. But that said, is something we've got to look at. So that's been really useful to hear that feedback today.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Helena.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you very much, and look forward to taking these things forward with you. And Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway is basically everything that's on the report as recommendations. I will be taking that back with whose support, who I've roped you in now. There's no backing down. This is all public. We'll certainly be taking this back to the Regional Partnership Board in Cwmtaf and Gadael and asking ourselves and the members of that board how we are going to address these recommendations and how we can support you, Commissioner, to lobby Welsh Government and make these changes happen, because I do honestly believe that the price we will pay for not encouraging and supporting older people to regain their pre-COVID independence, I think no country could afford the cost of that. So I will make a promise now that as far as Cwmtaf Meganic is concerned, Hugh and I'm roping Hugh again, we will make sure that your report is on the next agenda and we ask ourselves some very serious questions about how we can address your recommendations.
Rachel,
I got no choice now, have I? We'll have to do it now then. Okay, there we go.
This is being recorded and is public. This is fantastic. Thank you all very much indeed. And just to say, the actions that are in the report, my fantastic team are working on those every day. So we are making progress on those immediate actions. We're working with a number of you that have been on this webinar today, and with other stakeholders, and we will continue to do so. These are things that need to happen now and over the next weeks and months, as well as those longer term issues. So if you're interested in working with us or have anything to suggest, please don't hesitate to get in touch. This is not about one person doing something or one organisation. It's about how we can all work together in a common good. So can I thank you all very much for coming today? Can I thank all my team and my colleagues for organising it so well, and a special thank you to Margaret, to Rachel, to Rocio, to Tom and to Hugh for speaking. I've certainly drawn a huge amount from it. And the phrase that has stuck with me really is not surprisingly one of Margaret's. Margaret, you talked about people who live on their own, and you said you feel as if you're being punished for something you haven't done. And that really resonated with me in terms of how some older people have felt and this notion of being left behind. So let's go on from here. Let's make that pledge that we won't be the country that leaves people behind. We will be the nation that works together in solidarity to ensure that we can come through this. So Diolch yn fawr, thank you so much again, and please all stay safe and well, and we'll be in touch with a note following today's event. Thank you.